I think Sam is, for in this moment in time, the perfect quarterback to execute the way they want to play, and with the pieces and the ability on all side and all phases to play high level football, and with O'Connell being as good a coach as he is, I think it's a really good setup right now.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast presented by Verizon, the NFL powered by Verizon 5G. I'm your host, Dave Helman. And look, every week of the NFL is exciting, but you wait all off season. You get excited in the summer for weekends like this. Week 7 is about as good of a slate as you could ask for in the NFL. 4 games between teams with winning records. 3 big division rivalries to look forward to, 2 Monday night games this week, 1 big Super Bowl rematch right here on Fox, and a partridge in a pear tree, I guess. I mean, it is a loaded slate from beginning to end. I didn't even mention the Thursday night game is a fun one. Sean Payton going down to New Orleans, trying to get his Denver Broncos above 500 in the city that he helped bring a championship to. Storylines galore heading into the weekend. And make sure, if you're not, that you're subscribed to the show on Spotify, on Apple Podcast. Go give us a subscribe on YouTube. We'll be back on the other side of the weekend to recap everything, go through all of the action, all of the big storylines, everything you need to know, because this feels like a week where we're going to see some separation, a real chance for drama, and to really give us a better understanding of where things are as we get close to the halfway point of this NFL season. So, all right, I think I teed it up pretty well there. Let's get to our first guest. As always, on Thursdays, we talk to our guy, Peter Schrager, on the cheat sheet to talk about so many of the biggest matchups this weekend, headlined by Chiefs at 49ers. Should be a good one. Check it out. All right, Peter, we're talking Lions Vikings with Greg Olsen a little bit later on in the show, but even if we're not talking Lions Vikings, there are so many big matchups to get to that, like, this is one of those weeks where it's just a smorgasbord of big time football coming at you, starting with none other than the Super Bowl rematch, a game I think a lot of people were thinking about back in April or May when the schedule came out. Chiefs going to Santa Clara to take on the 49ers in a Super Bowl rematch. And I'm a little surprised to see that the 49ers are a favorite, even as the home team. I'm a little surprised by that.
I am too, and especially because the Chiefs have just owned them in these big moments. In the last 2 Super Bowls they played, obviously, the Chiefs were down 10 in the fourth quarter, and Mahomes found a way against those defenses, and the offenses couldn't match. It's interesting. I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit. So Mike Mulvihill, who is the head of insights and data and analytics at our employer, Fox Sports, revealed to me a couple of weeks ago that when the schedule makers are putting together the schedule around January and February, the networks put together a list of their top 10 games that they would prefer, knowing the matchups. And here's how we rank them. Fox's number 1 request was this Chiefs 49ers rematch. And they got it right here, smack dab in the middle of October, with AL and NLCS going on and with baseball on Fox. Like, this is the game of the year in a lot of ways. And yet you look at this one, it's like the Niners, have they upheld their end of the bargain? To see them favored is surprising, but a lot of people are still doubting the Chiefs and saying, well, how are they going to get that firepower? And with this player injured and with Rice out and Pacheco out, how are they going to be able to keep up? I still would have the Chiefs favored in this one. On the field product, the wins, of course, they're undefeated, but also psychologically, mentally, I don't think they're scared to walk into San Francisco to play that team on their field either.
I hadn't thought about Mike in a minute. We had Mike on right when the schedule came out, and I remember getting this game. You could tell it was like winning a Super Bowl for Fox. Like, to have this game, it's Tom Brady's game, obviously. Like, the pageantry.
It's interesting. It's also the first time Brady's calling a Mahomes game, and we might say, who cares who's calling these games, right? Troy Aikman's called 1,000 Mahomes games, and Collinsworth has called 1,000,000 Lamar games, but I still thought it was cool when I saw Brady on the mic calling a Lamar game. I still think it's cool seeing Brady on the mic calling a Mahomes game. And The ultimate goal is going to see Brady calling two quarterbacks in a Super Bowl. And if it is Mahomes, it sounds blasphemous, and I know we don't want to, ever compare anyone to Tom Brady. If it's Mahomes in the Super Bowl, we're talking now another Super Bowl opportunity, another ring at a pace that is faster than Brady. Like, it all gets interesting with Brady on the mic.
Yes, it absolutely does. That'll be that. I would say we're getting ahead of ourselves, but with the Kansas City Chiefs, are we? Are we really? Like, I don't know about that. I'm glad you brought up the lack of firepower for the Chiefs. Like, I don't really worry about it, to be honest with you. Like, it's so typical and predictable that Juju Smith-Schuster stepped in and looked like the guy from the 2022 team that led that team in receiving yards. So I trust them to figure it out, but it is interesting that we're recording after the two big trade targets go off the market. Like, we can't daydream about Amari Cooper or Davante Adams being in Kansas City. I mean, is there anybody even left for Kansas City
Yeah,
to pursue, or is this it? Are we going with Juju and Travis Kelce and hoping Pacheco can come back quickly? Like, what do you think?
there are some names that are still going to be available, and the trade deadline still is not for 20 days as we're recording this. So there is still time. When you see guys like Juju and Kareem Hunt and Fortson, Jody Fortson come back into the fold. And of course, you've got all these guys who you're waiting to step up, whether it be Sky Moore or Justin Watson. It's not your offense you thought this was going to be with Hollywood and Rashee Rice and Pacheco and all these guys coming out guns blazing. They get by though. And you know what? Their defense leads the way now. And it's hard for us to swallow that knowing that Kelsey and Mahomes are still in that uniform. But like the defense and Spags' unit is what carries them in a lot of ways. I will say this: Chiefs historically, they don't do certain things with their salary cap that other teams do. They look for the guys that make sense financially. They don't buy out contracts. So like the Jets taking on the entire Davante Adams restructure is something that like the Chiefs wouldn't even entertain. The Bills get Amari Cooper at a discount price, but it's really just a rental till the end of the year. The name I would look at is Mike Williams, and this does not come from the Chiefs, but with Aaron Rodgers airing him out publicly, and with the Davante Adams move, that's a player who's on a 1 year deal for 10 million, who already most of that money's been paid for by the Jets. I could see Pittsburgh, I could see the Chiefs, I could see another team, looking at Mike Williams and saying, okay, well, that's a veteran guy that I could throw in my lineup, and at least he knows how to play football. We can get him the rock. I'm looking at other names that are like veteran guys of that caliber of players who are in the final years of their contracts who might be on some sinking ship teams. I mean, if you're Mahomes at this case, like, are you walking into Brett Veach's office and saying, I need someone else? Or is it one of those where it's like, he's got enough confidence and enough trust in the unit? Like, guys, we don't need anybody else. Like, we're good. We're undefeated and we've won with less.
If I'm Patrick Mahomes, that's what I'm saying into a microphone, and then I'm walking upstairs and saying, like, what do we, is anything out there? I mean, a name that comes to mind for me, I would at least call and see what's going on with DeAndre Hopkins. Like, it's not
No doubt.
super,
They
not
made an
super
offer to
exciting
him
in
this
Tennessee.
summer. I think there was a pretty good offer at some point, or there was conversations. I don't want to get ahead of my skis, but I remember talking to the Chiefs brass during the free agent spending period, and DeAndre Hopkins was certainly in the conversation. He's been with the Titans, and he's still with the Titans. And I think he had a good game a couple of weeks ago. Like, he still could play. So if the Titans have all this money tied into an unhappy Calvin Ridley and have some other players, maybe they're willing to part with DeAndre Hopkins. But again, another Davante Adams case where it's like really off the radar a little bit. It hasn't been talked about, and then gets to Kansas City, and all of a sudden it would be like, oh, wow, all right, DeAndre Hopkins is here, and he's suddenly healthy and ready to go.
Yeah, I think he's got 175 yards on the year, but like, I'm not judging any receiver in that offense the same way I'm not judging Amari Cooper for what was going on in Cleveland. So
No doubt.
I would feel good about that if he did join. One thing I wanted to mention with the 49ers is how much longer can Kyle Shanahan like test the limits of his scheme? Because, like, I mean, we've seen it with Purdy, we saw it with Jordan Mason, and now Jordan Mason might be hurt. Like, if you're down to your third running back, I mean, Isaac Guerrero had a great night on Thursday night against Seattle, but I mean, if you're really getting down to like your third string running back, you're already dealing with injuries in other places. Like, eventually there has to be a drop off, right? Or does there?
I don't know. Now it's Garendo is going to be the guy. And if we've learned anything from Kyle Shanahan and from his father's schemes, it's hey, if Terrell Davis goes down, we've got Mike Anderson, or if Mike Anderson goes down, we've got Olandis Gary, and if San Francisco's the case, we've got Matt Breida and Jerick McKinnon, and you go through the list of guys, whether it was, Eli Mitchell a few years ago. Like, to me, it doesn't phase them. That position doesn't phase them. They continue, and I'll tell you, Brock Purdy's playing really well. He played really well in Seattle. He played really well in a couple of their losses, even in that Minnesota loss where they got beat up. Like, he played well. I think Purdy can take on as much responsibility as he needs, or they can just rely on what's been working. But I don't think you have to, A, acquire anybody, or B, get panicked if you're San Francisco. Their offense is moving the ball.
I don't think I felt that way a year ago, but with the way Purdy's been playing with all of this adversity, I'm right there with you this year for sure. And also, I always appreciate the way you pull me back to like the macro because like I'm so focused on
No doubt.
2024 and you're like, yeah, this is what the Shanahans do. They pluck running backs out of
Not ideal.
obscurity.
Look, I mean, Dave, they pay Christian McCaffrey more than any other running back in the league gets paid. It's not like they don't value the position, and it's not like they don't value McCaffrey. It's just that they have been hardened and coarsened, and over decades of football, that family, the Shanahans, running back is not interchangeable. Terrell Davis and Christian McCaffrey are two names that, but like Alfred Morris had 1,600 yards for the Redskins one year. And I'm not slighting Alfred Morris at all, but like the running attack is always going to be a strength. And a lot of times it's not guys who are first round picks who are carrying the load.
Let's jump up to the early window on Sunday. Big, I guess I don't want to call it a measuring stick game because I think these are both good teams, but it's just a chance for two good teams to go against each other, help us get an idea of the hierarchy this early in the season, and that would be the Texans at the Packers, Lambeau Field early on Sunday. I'm typically not a shit stirrer. That's not what I go
No.
in for, but I did enjoy D'Amico Ryan saying that Jordan Love is the best quarterback the Texans have played this year. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he's just focused on the Packers and he just watched the tape of Jordan Love. But they have played Sam Darnold and Josh Allen. And I know those fan bases took that comment type of way.
Really fun matchup. Like, not traditional rivals by any means. The Texans and the Packers. In my head, can't even remember a time that they've played in Lambeau. And both teams are playing their best football of the year with two really cool young quarterbacks. Obviously, D'Amico has such respect for Jordan Love, but I can assure you that Jeff Hafley and Matt LaFleur have a ton of respect for C.J. Stroud. Hafley, of course, being at Ohio State and his history of watching, such Stroud moments. I'll tell you, Chiefs, 49ers, awesome. Lions, Vikings, awesome. Jets, Steelers, awesome for the drama of it all. This might be your game of the day. And it's like these two teams, and it wouldn't be sexy for Fox. I don't think we're clamoring for a Houston Texans Super Bowl, but like right now, I don't know if there's two teams playing better football in either conference than the Packers and the Texans the last few weeks.
I'm excited for, you just mentioned it, that chess match between CJ and the Packer defense. Because, I mean, an aggressive, confident quarterback like CJ Stroud is the king of, tight window throws and throwing guys open. And this is the defense that leads the league in takeaways. Last week was their first game without an interception.
Yeah.
So can the Packers take advantage of CJ Stroud, especially if he doesn't have Nico Collins? I can't wait to watch that that
The
particular
Packers have
matchup.
these two safeties. Obviously, Xavier McKinney was the big free agent signing. The other one, this Evan Williams, who's a rookie, has been outstanding. So you're getting superstar play from guys who were not there a year ago, meaning how do we improve? Well, new defensive coordinator and some new acquired pieces who are adding right away. I think this Packers team is better than last year, and last year's team finished pretty good, ending in the divisional round, almost beating the Niners.
Another thing to have an eye on in this game, and then we'll move on. But Danico Autry is back from his suspension. I think that's big. Like when the
Mhm.
Texans signed him, I was like, that is a sneaky huge signing because just an aggressive, physical, space eating, line wrecking D tackle, and you already have these two fantastic ends. I mean, they don't need to unlock their pass rush. It's very, very good,
There.
but this could take it to another level, in my opinion.
No doubt. And getting Joe Mixon back on offense last week was big too. You saw he made an immediate impact and their offense looked better. So good that Cam Akers was shipped out of town. They're good.
Monday night, God, it's such a good weekend. Like there is an amazing game in every single window, and the big one on Monday night, the Baltimore Ravens at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Great
I
game.
think, look, all respect to the Chiefs, but even with 2 losses, I think I got to call the Ravens the hottest team in the
I
NFL,
know.
the most impressive team in the NFL. I'm curious to see how this goes for Tampa because, like, if I told you this matchup at the start of the season, you'd be like, smash mouth running game against this amazing Todd Bowles Tampa defense. That hasn't really been why Tampa's
No.
winning. Tampa is the high flying, 15, 17 touchdowns on offense from Baker Mayfield offense, and there's this defense needs to catch up, and I don't know if this is the week to do it. Not against
It's
Lamar and Derrick Henry.
well, I don't know if I'm done. 700 miles they shipped everybody from Tuesday afternoon till Sunday to New Orleans because of Hurricane Milton. The entire organization was in New Orleans for like 5 days. I was talking to one of the coaches. He's like, we went to Dave and Buster's 3 times. Like, we're just trying to stay big. Like,
Right.
that you see that with the intercamp scrimmages in July, and sometimes you see it when a team has to stay on the West Coast, but never because it's been forced because of a hurricane with the anxieties that go with that. And then they come out and they put up 594 yards of offense, which is the most yards ever put up by a Tampa offense. And that's a year after they lose their offensive coordinator, Dave Canales, and with a new guy, Liam Cohen. So I am so amazed and really impressed with what Tampa did last week. I like what they're doing all season long, and I think they've got it going on, and Baker's playing great. But like that particular week, given the circumstances, I thought that was an amazing effort from that offense, and I don't think it lets up. They have so many weapons that are established guys, and Godwin and Evans, and of course, you have all the different play from Baker. But then you lose Rashad White and these two running backs. Bucky Irving, steps up and has 80 yards and 40 yards receiving, and it's like they're really good. The scheme is really good, and they've got a powerful front offensive line. So, like, I don't think they're going to suddenly score 3 points or 6 points against this Ravens defense, which has had a history of giving up yards this season.
I need to see more from Sean Tucker. I'll be like
The two-headed
I
monster,
this
Tucker and Bucky.
Rashad White goes out in this game and they have their best running day of the season. I mean, Sean Tucker had 2 carries for 7 yards coming into this game. And look, I
Right.
mean, the Saints had a horrible day on defense. That's part of this. Like, I think I saw they missed 16 tackles on the afternoon, but Sean Tucker looking like a versatile piece of that offense. 14 for 136, I think.
Great. And returns
Three
punts,
for
like
56
great.
as well. Yeah, I'm excited to see where this offense can continue to go. If they can continue to run the ball like that, they're a very exciting team. I would have said before the season this game had like 20-17 written all over it, and now I feel like it could be like
In the
35,
30s. Yeah.
31. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All
Yeah.
right. Let's wrap this thing up with the Thursday night game as we like to do. I don't think Sean Payton's return to the Superdome has the juice that it did like 2 or 3 weeks ago. But I do still think it's going to be a very interesting scene, and let's be blunt about it, like a game the Saints absolutely need if they're going to
Yeah.
stay relevant in this wild card conversation.
So Jeff Duncan has been the beat writer of the Saints and has been covering the Saints for 30 years. And anything out of the Saints that's news, he breaks it. And if you ever need a pulse of the team, it's usually through his words. He's there, he's embedded. And he had a really interesting column this week saying that like it's not all warm and fuzzy with how it ended with Sean in New Orleans. Like everyone thinks, all right, the conquering hero, he brought us a Super Bowl, comes back. And in fact, a lot of people within the organization and in the city itself don't love the fact that he essentially took a 1 year sabbatical with Fox and then forced his way out of a contract and, took more money elsewhere. And that in between danced a little bit with the Dolphins and might have danced a little bit with the Cowboys. And it's like, not being in that market, you think of it, you're like, he brought him a Super Bowl, he coached there for 20 years. All right. But like, I wonder if there's a little something extra from the Saints side this week with those players. Because a lot of those guys, Kamara, Cam Jordan, several of those big offensive linemen up front, they were there with Sean. And basically, if you look at it from a 30,000 foot view, it's like he retired, but immediately went into TV and then was shopping his services to be a head coach again. And he was all under contract with the Saints. So I'm not trying to shit stir either, which you said, but like, they're honoring Drew Brees on Thursday night, so it's gonna be a lot of good love in the building, and it's gonna be all that. But like, I don't know if there's gonna be a ton of love lost for Sean Payton and some of those players and those other people in the organization, which adds to the drama And especially if you think that, New Orleans is 4 straight losses is in desperation mode for a win.
I feel uniquely qualified to comment on this as a New Orleanian. I mean, I'll always love and respect what Sean Payton did for that team and for the city. But I remember when he retired thinking it feels like convenient timing that, that it looks like the glory days are over and Sean Payton's leaving. And
Hmm.
and I didn't know how long he was going to be retired, but I remember like I was watching the press conference like I think he'll be coaching again quickly. Like whether it's 2 years, 1 year,
Less than
whatever.
12 months after that press conference, he was doing a Broncos press conference, being welcomed back. Now, to their credit, Mickey and Miss Benson, they let him do that, and they figured out the compensation, and they let him out of his contract, and that was done well by the organization. Class move to do that. But I think there's some fans and some players and some others out there who didn't love the fact that Sean got out when he got out. Well, left the team with whatever is to be made of the Saints now.
Taking it back to the schedule release, I remember Cam Jordan, very active on Twitter, amazing Twitter follow. He said something along the lines of like, "When's the Denver game?" Like
Mm,
that's what I want to know. Like I care about the opener because that's the first team we have to get ready for, and I care about where the Denver game is, and it's here.
well, there you
So
go.
I'm excited to see this. I think it's been a rough month for the Saints, obviously,
Yes.
but I have a feeling the dome is going to be rocking at Breeze Payton levels for this, just to welcome Sean back to the
No
fold
doubt.
and make life difficult on Bo Nix. So that'll be interesting to watch.
We're here for it.
Peter, as always, man, love catching up with you. We'll talk to you soon. Enjoy this very full Week 7 slate.
You're the man, Dave. Appreciate you, dude.
We covered a lot of ground with Peter, but like I told him, we were saving one big one for Greg Olsen. He is on the call in Minneapolis this weekend as the Vikings, undefeated, 5-0, host the division rival Detroit Lions at 4-1. Definitely one of the biggest games of the weekend, and I was so excited to break it down in detail with Greg. All right, Greg, I mean, any NFC North game is going to be a good one. This was one to look forward to anyway, but looking really, really nice here in week 7. One of the games of the week, one of the games of the early season, in my opinion. The Lions coming off a big win, going up to face the Minnesota Vikings coming off a bye week. I mean, there's a lot to dive into here. Two of the best teams in the league in the early going. I am curious though. This is your first look this season at both teams. And with the Minnesota Vikings specifically, I'm so excited to talk to you about this defense. Like everybody loves it. Everybody's excited about the different things that they can do. From your time watching them, what exactly is the reason why they are so successful? Can you pinpoint anything about what they do so well?
Yeah, I think their approach is actually, I don't want to say simple, but in a lot of ways, it really is. They want to suffocate you on first and second down. Their entire goal is force negative plays on early downs, absolutely take away the run game, and make you have to operate in as many passing downs, primarily third down, but really any passing down that they can force. They want to create as many of those as possible. And then every single week, there's like a flavor of the week pressure. And every week it's slightly different. The personnel is different, how they use their safeties, their linebackers, their front. Sometimes there's one D lineman and everyone's got their in a 2-point stance. Sometimes there's multiple guys and they all drop. And then sometimes they'll every week there's a little bit of a flavor. And I think that's what Brian Flores does so well is after spending an entire week studying your protections, and he's looking at how the center points the mic. And if he points at the mic, is that for the lineman or is he telling the back, he's your guy? Like every team has their little bit of nuance in their protections. Once he feels like he's broken that code of what that drop back pass protection looks like, he's going to scheme up his alignment and his personnel and then pull the different levers of who comes. Maybe they all come and they play cover zero. Maybe none of them come and they drop to some, they play all up and then somehow they get to cover two. So it's a very simple formula in that regard. And if you're not really on it on early downs and you face a ton of third down, you better be really good in pass protection, which the Lions are. So that's one thing going their way. But I just don't think anybody around the league wants to just play Brian Flores and play him on an even standing and just play third down pass all day.
I'm so curious about that. And that's what I think is so interesting. Like if you get on social media or you go onto the film apps, you can pull up the all 22, you can see all these very fun clips of this Brian Flores defense. They're mugged up in like a cover zero look, and then they just bail out and it's cover two right at the snap. And it's very fun to watch, but I find myself wondering, like, surely other teams in the league have thought of this. Like, to your point, it's not something that other teams can't do. And I'm just curious, like, is this about buy-in from the Vikings players? Is it about versatility on the back end? Like, what enables them to do all of this fun disguising and things like that?
I think there's a lot of layers. I think it's a great question. I think you have to have versatile players. You have to have defensive linemen that can drop. You have to have linebackers that can rush. You have to have safeties that Harrison Smith is even under Zimmer when he was in that style system. They did a ton of the double up A gap pressure, and he was the weak side on the ball player, and he would push to a deep third and go play. So Harrison Smith in the secondary, he's kind of accustomed to this style, albeit a different approach with Flores than Zimmer back in the day. But so there is versatility in your personnel. There's a significant both physical, but even more so of a mental understanding. In order to play cover two, and you're the deep field safety, but you have to start at the line of scrimmage, you better have a really strong understanding of alignment, pre-snap formation of the offense, where your threat is, how you're going to get there, understanding underneath zone coverages. Sometimes we're going to match. Sometimes we're going to spot drop. Sometimes we're going to play man. I mean, Van Ginkel's pick six on Rodgers is a great example. They show all up pressure. It's 3rd and 6. Rodgers gives a little hand signal, which all that is just a sight. He's just a built-in sight. He wants to get the ball out knowing he doesn't have enough protectors for the amount of guys up in the line of scrimmage. And Van Ginkel flash fakes. He drops right underneath the little quick slant in breaker to the outside receiver, and he picks six it. Like, there's a mental ability. There's a versatility of physical skills. And yeah, you got to have a head coach and a system that also says, hey, you're going to get burned every once in a while. I know it looks right now you're 5-0 and you're riding high. You might give up a cover zero touchdown. You might take one too many swings and get burned. They're okay with that. They know more times than not, this style of defense is going to force so many negatives. It's going to create so many takeaways that it's going to put the offense in a trail position, and they're forced to have to throw, and play right into their hands.
It's going to be so fun. I mean, they're such a fun unit to watch, but against this offense in particular and Ben Johnson, what he's doing in Detroit, you touched on how great this offensive line is and the role that that'll play in this matchup. I wanted to ask you too. I'm so impressed by the athleticism and the versatility of this Detroit offensive line. Like, obviously they're good, but the stuff you can do in space with guys like Penei Sewell and moving guys around the formation. I mean, I know they did all the goofy throws to the offensive tackle in the Dallas game, but even without that, just the stuff you're able to do out on the edge with these guys, how do you see that factoring into a matchup against a defense like this?
I mean, you can be as creative as an offensive line, which Ben Johnson is, and we touched on it last year before the NFC Championship, the championship game. The beauty of Ben Johnson is he's kind of an enigma as far as like what's his big influence. He's every week there's a different flavor, there's a different style. He can be under center, he can be gun, it could be heavy drop back, it could be heavy play action, it could be outside zone, it could be downhill gap scheme, screens. You can only be that creative, obviously, if you have a play caller and a quarterback that can execute it. But really, the main linchpin in all this is you have to have an offensive line that has the ability to execute a lot of different styles. And most offenses around the NFL, they lean on one style of run, and they really want to major in one style of passing game. Maybe you're built for play action, and maybe you're built inside, outside zone, and you piece your offense together. They can be anything they want to be at any given down in any given series of a game because they have the flexibility and the talent of an offensive line to pull it off. Penei Sewell can get out on the perimeter on any pin and pull exterior toss play and run as good as anybody in the league. And then on 4th and 2, he can get a double team block with Zeitler, the right guard, and blow somebody off the ball on a downhill gap scheme run. Like, then you can do drop back. Then you can do play action. Like, it's just, I don't know if people understand just how hard it is to wear that many different caps as an offensive line unit. And he's not alone. They can do it across the board. So they are the key to that entire operation. And when you have a quarterback that's in control You have a good offensive line that can handle any style of play you want, and a very creative offensive coordinator. You see the results. It's not, it's not a surprise. This
Right.
is what you're going to get when you have all of those elements together.
So like everything about Detroit is fun, but watching that stuff away from the ball and how unique it looks, it's just a ton of fun to watch. I can't wait to see that. Fortunately, down note for the Vikings, obviously, I mean, they win by 38 last week. Everything's clicking. And then you lose Aidan Hutchinson early in the second half. We'll see. Dan Campbell didn't rule out a return much later from now. I mean, we'll see where that goes. Hoping for the best for Aidan, but I am curious. He does so much for that defense. He was in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. I guess for now, I'm wondering how you kind of scheme around that, and maybe, do you recreate Aidan in the aggregate, or is this a situation where if Detroit wants to get back to the level that they were with him, do they need to consider, personnel moves before the trade deadline or anything like that?
Yeah, the reality is, barring trading for, I don't know, Max Crosby. Like I'm not saying
Right.
it's realistic. I'm just saying, like, there,
But it would be that type of player for
Nick
sure.
Bosa. I mean,
Yeah.
there's Myles Garrett. There's like a handful of guys throughout the league that you could say, okay, if we were able to somehow steal them away, plug them in for Hutchinson, we could just go 1-for-1 trade. Maybe there's three, if that. He's just such a unique player. You can his production's incredible. And even on the plays that he doesn't even end up in the stat sheet, he disrupts everything. His effort, his motor. I mean, the guy is absolutely incredible. You're not replacing him. And I'm not sure if they have a collection of guys that even together can replace him. And what I mean is not even so much sacks, pressures. That is going to be very hard to duplicate. The attention he gets, the amount of attention sliding the offensive line. They don't want to run away from him because he chases them down. They can't run at him because he's great at the point of attack. Like, he changes your entire game plan. So now all of a sudden you take him out, and I'm Kevin O'Connell, and I'm preparing for this defense. You never want to see a guy go down. I'm not saying wish injury, but you're taking a big deep breath. You're going, okay, that is what the guy we had to game plan around is no longer on the defense. He's no longer on the field. It just changes everything. Your protections aren't quite as stressed. You're not keeping extra running backs and tight ends to chip the edge. You're getting more guys into the coverage. You're stressing the defensive backs more. Like, it just has a compounding effect when you take a guy out like that. And listen, guys are going to have to step up. The old football cliches is next man up. And while that's all true, like, people can say what they want. You just don't replace all pro players.
Sure.
It just doesn't happen. So it's heartbreaking. I hate it for him. I hate it for the Lions. They're one of the best stories of the last 3 years in football. I mean, they're just fun. Dan Campbell is like the ultimate guy you want to cheer for, play for. I love everything about him. Like, you can see why people have fallen in love with the Lions' path to getting to this point. And Hutchinson on and off the field was a big reason for it.
It's definitely, I mean, still a very, very talented team, but that's going to be the challenge here as we get toward the second half of the season is figuring out how to cope with that. I promise I didn't forget the quarterback position. I saved it till last, but I'm just curious. You've watched, you played, you know so much about this game. What do you think about Sam Darnold so far? Obviously, the first 4 games were incredible. Not awful in London, but definitely a little bit of a dip compared to the first 4 weeks. I mean, is this sustainable? What have you seen from Sam Darnold so far?
Listen, I think Sam is playing in this offense exactly how they need this offense to be executed. He's throwing the ball downfield. His downfield passing is as good as anybody in the league. He's playing from the pocket. Aaron Jones has been an unbelievable addition for him. He goes out not last week, but their last game in London against the Jets, and they just don't look the same. I will say a big reason for Minnesota's struggles, quote unquote struggles, in that Jets game is that Jets defense is salty. I mean, that Jets defense is very good. I don't know if anyone right now, the Jets are a little bit in disarray, firing Saleh and but like, that defense is very good. So I think it was equally, they were good as much as it is Minnesota wasn't quite as fine-tuned as they had been. They jumped out to a 17-0 lead. I think they took the foot off the gas just a little bit. They were struggling against some of the man coverage, struggling to separate, struggling to complete the passes they've hit all year, especially downfield. So it definitely wasn't their best game, but Tell you what, Kevin O'Connell, since he's gotten that job, he has done nothing but show that he can flat out coach. He can call plays, and you just can't help. I look at Sam Darnold very similar to how we viewed Jared Goff a couple years ago, where at their original stops, where they were highly drafted, top couple picks in the draft, one overall. I think Sam was like 2, 3, whatever he was, and they had good moments. Obviously, Goff goes to the Super Bowl. But they needed a fresh new location, a fresh offensive mind to kind of recapture their abilities and make them like that's exactly what's happened to Goff now. We're in year 3 and he's their future. I'm not ruling that out in Minnesota. I think Darnold, from a skill set standpoint, he's a very good athlete. He can make every throw. That Kevin O'Connell system is a very quarterback-driven system, very similar to what we're seeing with Purdy and Shanahan and the McVays. And it's that world. And he's got a lot of good weapons around him. Aaron Jones, a great signing, obviously, with Addison and Justin Jefferson. He gets Hawkinson back at some point. This is a real team. And with how much we've talked about their defense, I think Sam is, in this moment in time, the perfect quarterback to execute the way they want to play. And with the pieces and the ability on all sides and all phases to play high level football, and with O'Connell being as good a coach as he is, I think it's a really good setup right now.
I said this earlier in the week, maybe I was a little bit reluctant to jump on the bandwagon just because nobody was talking about this team in August, but the resume is as good as anybody's in the league right now. What they've done, how they've done it. I think they're for real. And another test coming up this week. On paper, it's as good as it gets in the NFL.
And the last thing I'll say is, how many of these examples are we going to see where a veteran quarterback goes to a new team?
Yes.
Offensive driven mind, gets with either a coordinator or the head coach, however the setup is. And all of a sudden they look reinvented, right? I mean, we saw it with Baker in Tampa last year with Canales, and now it's carried over with Liam Cohen. We saw it with Goff. Now he was with a great offensive mind that ran its course. They wanted to take that offense somewhere else. They get Stafford. He teams up with Ben Johnson, and they've taken the league by storm. Now the same thing's happening with Darnold, going with O'Connell.
Throw in Geno Smith as well.
Geno Smith. I mean, we can go down the line of highly talented veteran quarterbacks that have a change of scenery, and they get partnered with the right offensive mind, head coach or coordinator, whichever, and they have a career resurgence. We're seeing this play out in multiple locations. So what Sam is doing, I don't know if it's necessarily a huge surprise, because we've seen other similar examples. He's highly, highly talented.
This is a conversation for another day, but everything you just said is why I'm keeping a close eye on Bryce Young. I'm not willing to close that book at all. We'll see what happens with him. But yeah, it's an incredible story. And the Vikings drafted JJ McCarthy, obviously. So I don't know what that means in the big picture, but the way he's playing, if he keeps this up, Sam Darnold will have a starting opportunity in the NFL next year, whether it's in Minnesota or somewhere else. I think that's a really fun storyline to watch. And like I said, one of the best games of week 7, if not the best game. Greg, as always, man, I really love talking with you. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Take care, guys.
Next preview for week 7 is an old school NFC East rivalry. The Philadelphia Eagles heading up the interstate to take on the New York Giants. Feels like a perfect segment for On the Road, presented by Honda. Dreams are unstoppable. And I'm not going to say MetLife Stadium has been a horror show for the Philadelphia Eagles. It's not the case. They're 9-5 since that stadium opened in 2010. But you look at recent years, don't take these games for granted, Eagles fans. Jalen Hurts just 1-3 as Philadelphia's starter in New York. For one reason or another, things have gone wrong here in recent years. The season finale last year, they lose 27-10, was kind of emblematic of that collapse in the second half of the 2023 season. So certainly don't think the Eagles should be taking this for granted. We're going to dive into it right now. And who better to talk to than our resident New York Giants, really NFC East expert, Ralph Vacchiano. He will be at the game on Sunday. He joins me now to dive into all things. And Ralph, I think this is the most interested I've been in an Eagles-Giants game in a while. I mean, I know they've played a lot of great games over the years, but the last, 5-6 years, it hasn't had that much juice to it. The Giants have been down for most of that time. The Eagles can typically count on wins in this series, but like I just said, that hasn't really been the case recently.
Yeah, and going into this season, I didn't think it would be the case again because I really thought the Eagles would get off to an early roll and start to run away with the division, and I knew the Giants would struggle a little bit. But what we've seen so far, take away last week, Daniel Jones for the Giants is playing better, and the Eagles' offense really hasn't kicked into gear very well. So right now, the way they're playing, they're closer than I would have expected. And it could make for an intriguing game, unless the Eagles suddenly get things right or the Giants start to fall apart. Obviously, that could change it. But I think that they are probably a little more evenly matched than I was expecting them to be.
I would have guessed that the Eagles, 2 weeks ago, I would have said Eagles as an 8 or 9 point favorite, even on the road in MetLife Stadium. It's not the case, just a 3-point spread, according to the experts. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's potential for this to be a very even matchup. Before we get into that, I got to address the human interest element of it all, which is that Saquon Barkley apparently thinks he's not going to get booed by New York Giants fans. I'll read the exact quote. He said, "Maybe I'm naive, but I think it's over. That chapter's closed. I truly don't care no more, and I'm pretty sure fans don't care no more." Saquon, you're naive, my friend. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I know he's a great Giant. He seems like a great guy, but that's the way this division works. You go back to the stadium that you played in after your first game since joining a rival team. I'm guessing the Giants fan base is going to let him hear it all day on Sunday.
Look, there are Giants fans that are still ticked off about things that happened in the 1970s. So they certainly haven't forgotten what happened last March. And, look, I don't think it's necessarily fair. I think Saquon Barkley would have stayed in New York if the money was there. It wasn't. So he went to the Philadelphia Eagles. That's the team that was going to pay him. Nobody else came up with a contract offer like that. It's business, and it's not his fault. The Giants had their chance over a period of a couple of years where they could have given him that kind of contract. So I don't think they should be bitter, but they are. And they really took it out on him on social media. And we certainly heard the calls to talk radio and people who are really angry and consider Saquon Barkley a traitor. And I would be shocked if he gets many more than a few token cheers during the game. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not booed every time he touches the ball because New York sports fans, probably Northeast sports fans, just don't get over things that fast. They hold grudges for a very, very long time. Maybe after his career, when he comes back, he'll get some applause, but he's going to have to be retired and distanced from Philadelphia first.
And I've seen this too many times. Yeah, like 5 years from now, this might all be water under the bridge, especially if Saquon's not still an Eagle. But for at least this season, probably even all of next season, that's just going to be something that lingers. That's just the way sports work. So sorry in advance, Saquon, but I do think he has a great chance to get the last laugh. He's off to a fantastic start. If you're watching, you just saw his stats up on the screen. Really, other than a down week last week against Cleveland, I think he's been one of the best things going for this Philadelphia offense. And if you listen to Nick Sirianni, the explanation for his chirping with fans was that maybe the fans thought he wasn't running the ball enough. Do you think the Eagles will try to get Saquon going against this New York front? It sounds like Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence are going to play, but maybe there's some potential for a mismatch there with some injuries on the front.
Yeah, first of all, the Eagles fans have been clamoring for Nick Sirianni and whoever his offensive coordinator of the day happens to be to run the ball more for a couple of years now. So I'm not surprised he's hearing those chants. You spend that kind of money on Barkley, you should run him a little bit more. And I do think they will. That being said, they're also getting healthy in the rest of their offense. They'll have A.J. Brown back. They'll have Devontae Smith back. And that gives them a pretty good passing attack, which theoretically should open things up for Saquon Barkley. I think Nick Sirianni has a little flair for the dramatic and an understanding of the situation. So I'm sure he wants Saquon Barkley to have a big game going into the Meadowlands. All that being said, they are down an offensive lineman. Jordan Mailata is going to miss the game, their left tackle. And the Giants' defense has been a lot better than anybody expected, especially up front. They have more sacks than any team in the league, the best pass rush. Dexter Lawrence is having a monster year. He is expected to play. So is Brian Burns, who's been terrific as well. But that front has been surprisingly good. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be easy for Saquon Barkley, but I do think Nick Sirianni is going to try, and Kellen Moore too, obviously, for whatever input he has in his own offense. He's going to try to get Saquon Barkley to be the star of this game on Sunday.
If the Giants manage to win this game, I mean, you just talked about it perfectly, but there is some potential for havoc in the pass rush game when Jalen Hurts does drop back to pass. Dexter Lawrence, I don't know how realistic it is for a guy on a middling team to win Defensive Player of the Year. Typically, those awards go to guys on big time Super Bowl contenders, but 7 sacks, second in the league in pressures from interior defensive linemen. I think he's got 17 according to Pro Football Focus. And then you just mentioned Jordan Mailata is going to miss this game. Fred Johnson is working at left tackle. I think obviously you've got potential for a mismatch there with Brian Burns. And even surprisingly, Landon Dickerson for Philadelphia has allowed 15 pressures and 3 sacks this season. I would, for a variety of reasons, try to keep Jalen Hurts out of true drop back situations in this game.
I would too. And honestly, I've been surprised about how much the Eagles offensive line has struggled this year. I know we expected a little regression with Jason Kelce gone. I don't think it's all his absence that's doing it. I think they've just, whether it's the scheme or whatever it is, it just hasn't been as powerful. Still one of the better offensive lines in the league, but not the best. And Jalen Hurts has been in some trouble, been forced out of the pocket a little bit too much. And that's going to be the key for the Giants' victory. They really need to keep him off balance and kind of just knock the rhythm out of that Eagles offense. The Giants don't have much of an offense of their own. They will get probably Malik Neighbors back if he can clear concussion protocol in time. That rookie receiver is a huge part of their passing game. He really is their passing game. Devin Singletary, their running back, looks like he'll play. They did lose their own left tackle, Andrew Thomas, which is a big blow to the Giants' offensive line. But, the Giants have some potential to generate a little bit of offense, but they're not going to get a lot. Their ceiling is in the high teens, low 20s. The Eagles could be more explosive than that unless the pass rush can get to Jalen Hurts. That to me is the entire key to this game. If they can get to him early, the Giants will have a chance. If it looks like Jalen Hurts has plenty of time in the pocket, he'll just pick them apart all day long.
Feel free to remind me I said this if this game is a dud, but for all the reasons you just said, I just think there's potential for some real excitement here. I mean, Malik Neighbors, hopefully he can go against a shaky Philadelphia secondary. Andrew Thomas is also out in this game, so both pass rushes should have opportunity to make life miserable on the other quarterback. I don't know. I'm thinking we might see a really good old-fashioned Giants-Eagles game, which just doesn't feel like it's been the case here over the last, 6-7 years or so. Hopefully I'm right, because I feel like we're overdue for a really good game in this series, Ralph, and I hope it pans out for you, man.
I think we could get it. I hope so too. It'd be nice to see a good game. Again, it's sort of, if the Eagles play down to the level they've been playing at and the Giants can get that level up just a little bit, then they're pretty even. But, the Eagles still have that breakout potential. We've been talking about this for really since the middle of last year, maybe the beginning of last year. They've got so much potential to be an explosive team, and they just can't put it together. Maybe this is the week, but the way they've been going, probably not. And if that case, in that case, I think if their offense is diminished a little bit, the Giants can hang around. And if they can hang around, who knows what can happen in the fourth quarter.
I think that's a really good point. One way or the other, this is going to be a game worth talking about, because the Eagles are either going to, crack their neck and get back to business and get back to looking like a really good team, or we could be having a completely different conversation about just how muddy the NFC East is by Sunday night. So we'll see which way it goes. Ralph, always appreciate talking with you, man. I'm sure we'll check in when this one's over.
Thanks, Dave. Enjoy the game.
Such a loaded slate here in week 7, like we keep talking about. We wanted to give you another big road matchup here in our On the Road segment. It is presented by our dear friends at Honda. You want to talk about unstoppable dreams? How about the unstoppable dream of Davante Adams as a New York Jet? I mean, was this the most predictable trade saga in NFL history? If you missed it, we haven't had a chance to talk about it here on our show. Davante Adams traded to the New York Jets right after that Monday Night Football loss. And I'm just thinking about the number of clips of people suggesting this could happen. You know, Aaron Rodgers joked about it on a golf course over the summer. This was always destined to happen, and sure enough, it did. And sure enough, Davante Adams is going to play this week as the New York Jets go to Pittsburgh to face the Steelers. He missed the last 3 games with a hamstring injury, just cleared right up when he got to the facility in New Jersey to report for duty. The Jets sent a conditional pick. It's a 3rd-round pick that can become a 2nd-round pick if he's good. And I lean toward agreeing with Dame Lillard, who tweeted during the week, you know, watch Davante Adams go become Randy Moss now that he's teamed up with Aaron Rodgers. Randy Moss is tough because Randy Moss with Tom Brady in 2007 after he left the Raiders was 22, 23 touchdowns. I don't know if Davante is going to do that, but he looked plenty healthy, plenty good. I know we're constantly talking about the next new thing, especially when it comes to wide receivers. I mean, you're only ever as good as your last outing. I still think Davante Adams has a lot of gas in the tank, and I think he gives this Jets offense a lot of potential to continue that role we saw against Buffalo. I know they lost that game, but a much, much improved Jets offense put up almost 400 yards on Buffalo. For God help me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I believe the Jets can still be a pretty good team. I picked them to go to the playoffs before the season. Not saying I feel good about it. Here 6 games into the season, but this gives me renewed hope. And I think that's probably why the Jets did it, is to cling to that idea that they can finally break that playoff drought. This feels like something that needed to happen if they're going to justify the Aaron Rodgers trade. It's a really funny place for us to get our first look at Davante Adams because Steelers just played his old team. Mike Tomlin joked at the beginning of the week when this happened that he spent last week preparing for Davante Adams, the Raider, and now he's preparing for Davante Adams, the Jet. Of course, the key difference being Davante's actually going to be on the field. Should be a good test for a really salty Pittsburgh defense. The other side of this one is a little more confusing. The word coming out of Pittsburgh is that Tomlin is making a switch at quarterback. Sounds like they're going with Russell Wilson over Justin Fields. And I'm not trying to convince anybody that Justin Fields has been amazing. He's been perfectly serviceable. 1,100 passing yards, 5 touchdowns. The big stat for him is just 1 interception in 6 games, which is a nice, I mean, that's what you wanted him to do, was limit the mistakes. It's not about how good he's been. I don't buy that the Steelers have a higher ceiling with the 2024 version of Russell Wilson. Sure, if it was the guy from a decade ago who can escape from any pressure, extend any play for 5, 6, 7 seconds, find guys downfield, that's one thing. I don't think that's Russ anymore at this stage in his career. And I can't help but notice Justin Fields has rushed for 50 or more yards in half of the Steelers games, and he's rushed for 5 touchdowns. We're splitting hairs here because I don't know that either one of these quarterbacks is the long-term future of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I like that dynamic ability and versatility that Justin Fields brings. I don't think I buy that Russell Wilson has it. So I don't think I would have made this change, but I am not one of the most accomplished coaches in the NFL with no losing seasons and a Super Bowl ring on my resume. So hopefully this works out for Mike Tomlin. It's going to be a heck of a test against the new added firepower with Davante Adams on the Jets. Don't think I was that excited about this matchup on Sunday night on Tuesday morning before the trade, but by Tuesday night, I was all the way in. Yeah, this should be a really good one. Sunday Night Football. Time now for the Super 6, sponsored by DraftKings. And if you're not familiar, get familiar. Every week, you can head over to foxsports.com and the Fox Sports app. Play the Super 6, essentially. We provide you with 6 different bets. Can be scores, can be props, yardage totals, point totals, all that good stuff. You pick the winners in 6 categories. If you get them all right, you can win big. It's a very fun way to keep up with all of the action during an NFL weekend. And I'm going to do my best to get you started down the right path. We'll see how it goes because this is a little tricky this week. We're going to take 2 fun props. We're picking we're ordering 1 to 4 performances in some of the biggest games of the weekend. Let's start with two of the ones I'm the most excited for. So one of our props this week is which order will these teams score the most points in two big games? It's Atlanta, Seattle, and Minnesota, Detroit. I'm going to order from 1 to 4 who I think is going to score the most points this weekend. And I'm going to lead with the Atlanta Falcons. Not loving the Seahawks scoring defense. I know they're getting some guys back healthy on that side of the ball, but the way Atlanta has been moving the football the last few weeks, I think it's sustainable. I don't think it's a surprise that this is the second highest point total of the week, 51.5 points over under. And let's have some fun. I think this thing's going over. I think both of these teams are going to score in the 30s. That's why I've got Atlanta number 1. Just behind them, I've got Seattle. Gino and his guys doing their thing. I'm hoping this is one of the most fun games of the weekend. Then at 3, I've got Detroit. I do think the Lions have what it takes to go on the road and win in Minnesota, although this is another game with a very high point total. I'll take Minnesota to finish 4th. I do think both these teams could score some points, though. Really hoping that's an entertaining one, but I'll go Atlanta, Seattle, Detroit, Minnesota. Then this is the most fun category I've seen in the Super 6 so far. We're ordering the most total yards by a Brown. You have your choice between A.J. Brown versus the Giants, Amon-Ra St. Brown versus the Vikings, Chase Brown versus Cleveland, and Jerry Jeudy, who is a Cleveland, wait for it, Brown, against the Cincinnati Bengals. Good job with the wordplay by our people at the Super 6. I'm going to go number 1, A.J. Brown. I think that's a favorable matchup with the New York secondary. Not going to think too hard about it. Amon-Ra St. Brown, not a huge game numbers-wise against Dallas last week. I think they're going to need him a little bit more in this game against the Minnesota Vikings. I'll take him number 2. Chase Brown, number 3 against Cleveland. Cleveland does have a stout run defense, or at least a good run defense. And then Jerry Jeudy, with the quarterback problems, the offensive problems in Cleveland, I'm putting Jerry Jeudy 4th. I don't really trust anybody in that Cleveland offense to produce, especially with Amari Cooper out the door to Buffalo. So that's what I'm doing with those two Super 6. But we've got a third one for you, another international game this weekend. And listen, I'm still really angry about the way this played out for me last week. I picked Caleb Williams to throw for more yards than Trevor Lawrence. Spiritually, I was right. He threw for 230 or 226 and 4 touchdowns. The Bears won by 20, and I'm wrong. Brutal, absolutely brutal. But I am undeterred. Prop this week is who's throwing for more yards, Trevor Lawrence or Drake May. I'm going right back to the well, and that well is not the Jaguars. Drake May threw for 243 yards last week in his debut against a much better team than the Jacksonville Jaguars. If he can do it against Houston, I think he can do it against Jacksonville. I don't know if the Patriots win, but I think Drake May is going to bomb away because that's just about all he can do in this Patriots offense. So I will take Drake May and just hope to the gambling gods that it goes better for me than my Caleb prop did last week. That does it for the Super 6 for week 7. A loaded show for a loaded week 7 schedule, but we are not quite done yet. One last thing to get to, and that's our hurry up offense. Here at the end of the show, this is where we talk about the rest of the matchups on the schedule, give you at least one interesting tidbit to chew on, a nugget to know heading into the weekend, give you something about everything on the schedule, not just the big ticket games. That's the funny thing, though. There's so many big ticket games in week 7. We've covered a lot of ground. We don't have that much left to get to. I think there's 6 games in the hurry up offense for us to go through. So if I can't get through this in 2 minutes, then my producers really need to have a harsh conversation with me. So having said those famous last words, they have given me 2 minutes on the clock. I will do my best to get through this before then. Let's start it off with the Tennessee Titans at the Buffalo Bills. Amari Cooper traded to Buffalo during the week. So excited to be a Bill. He drove from Cleveland to Buffalo. I love it. I'm excited to see that. I don't think we're talking enough about Josh Allen having 10 touchdowns and 0 picks through the first 6 games. He's just the 5th player since the merger to do that. I like the Bills. Bengals at Browns. Joe Burrow has actually yet to win a game in Cleveland. 3 attempts, no wins. So don't write the Browns off yet, but man, Cleveland, bottom 3 scoring offense, worst third down conversion rate in the league, worst sack rate in the league. This might be the most frustrating loss yet for Cincinnati if they can't find a way to get it done. Dolphins at Colts, Anthony Richardson expected back in the lineup. That's exciting. We need to see him play. We want to see that big arm. At the same time, I'm interested. Joe Flacco has played in 3 games for the Colts this year. He's got 7 touchdowns. That's more than Anthony Richardson's 6 touchdowns in his 8 career games as a Colt. So need to see that production start ticking upward for the young guy. Panthers at Commanders. Commanders heavily favored here. They're 8-point favorites, and I get it, rightfully so. But I'm not going to be surprised if there's some fireworks here. These 2 defenses have allowed 12 touchdown passes each. That's tied for the 2nd highest total in the league. Andy Dalton has been moving the ball for Carolina. I think there could be some points here. Raiders at Rams. It's a big week for the Rams. 1-4 is Sean McVay's worst start as a head coach. They haven't been 1-4 in a decade. They haven't been worse than that since 2011. They're going to get some injured guys back eventually, but it's not going to matter if they can't find a way to win a game like this. So big spot for the Rams here in LA. Chargers at Cardinals, the other Monday night game. Love this stat. It's the first time in Justin Herbert's career that the Chargers have had a top 10 rushing offense. And lo and behold, they're above 500. I think they improve to 4-2 with a win over Arizona. And there's the buzzer. Still probably too close for comfort given how few games we went through, but whatever. That does it for the Week 7 preview. So excited for this one. So excited to be back on the other side of the weekend. We will have news, insight, information from all the broadcast crews at all the games. Obviously, we're going to take a close look at the Chiefs 49ers. Tom Brady on the call in the Bay. So much to look forward to. I said it at the top. We dream of weekends like this in the spring and the summer, and it's here. Hope you enjoy the games. Hope you subscribe on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and come back. Give us a listen on Monday as we recap it all. Enjoy your weekends. Enjoy your football. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you so soon.